because you might hear from my voice, I'm really excited because we are at the Beechcraft Heritage Museum here in Tennessee with Charles Parish, who's the president of the museum, and I'm so excited to be here.
This is actually serial number 1 Travel and created the very first Staggerwing, and this is it. This is serial number 1.
This is Staggerwing number 1. It's that top one I've been excited to see, because there it is, the 1936 Bendix.
We like to think that the Beechcraft Heritage Museum is not just a museum with bricks and mortar with exhibits. We're also a campus. We have a beautiful kind of out wilderness setting. We have what we call beach park. We have RV hookups, shower house, a bunkhouse, and wonderful backdrop of nature.
It's a good place to stop if you're doing a road trip cross country.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in an aircraft or your RV. We have lots of families that come and have picnics, and after a tour, and yeah.
On a slightly less blustery day than today, I suppose.
Yeah, typically this time of year is not the time to come, but anytime in the spring and the summer and fall. Our summers get pretty hot.
Our summers don't, so we're jealous.
But we have air conditioning. So.
Okay, so we're moving forward now, aren't we? Because we're about to make Ellie very happy because she is a big Bonanza fan.
Okay.
And I promised her there would be some Bonanzas, and.
Well, we call this the Harold Bost Hangar, the Bost Hangar, and this is a portrait of Mr. Bost. He just passed away this last year.
Oh, did he?
But he was real instrumental in making this particular hangar come to life, and gave a lot of his own personal money and raised a lot of money for this hangar. It's 36,000 square feet. As you said, it has numerous Bonanzas, but also some interesting military aircraft, and we'll mention the Starship in a few minutes. But
there she is, sitting quietly.
Ellie, before we go any further, I thought it might be interesting just to point out something here. We don't have these displayed. That's another project. We're always working on new projects around here. We've got new ideas and things we want to do, but these are original wind tunnel models for the V-tail Bonanza.
So, hand carved, I guess, or are they? Yeah, I guess they would be, wouldn't they? Look at those. So, are each of them a slightly different iteration?
Yes, different maybe cowling designs when they were looking at different model engine modifications or different type of engine applications. The sign above, that was the sign that all the employees at Wichita walked under to go to work at the factory. For years, and Beech gave that to us. It's great to have. There's no telling how many folks have walked under that going to make these wonderful, beautiful products.
So I guess in here we really see the evolution of the company, because you have the Naked Staggerwing, we'll call it over there, but you've also got the twin-engine aircraft over there, which they produced in great numbers during the war, along with many other types as well, didn't they? Right. It wasn't just...
I would highly recommend getting a good shot of this. This is the genealogy of the Beech factory, and obviously we can see
me jumping ahead.
Excuse me.
But
well, you can see the first Travel Air that we witnessed in the Walter Beech hangar, Travel Air serial number 1, all the way through to, that was the mid-80s, 82 or so, of all the Beech aircraft line of products that they had. From the Staggerwing, the Beech 18. We'll see some Beech 18s in a few minutes, all the way through the Bonanza up to the King airline. So.
Okay, lead on, sir.
Probably two of the most interesting exhibits we have in the museum is the Cutaway V-tail Bonanza, and behind it, we'll get a little closer look at it in just a second, the uncovered Staggerwing. I always like to kind of point out the difference pre-30s to present day. Of course, during wartime in the early 40s, we started learning how to produce metal airplanes to a great degree for the war effort. And after the war, we brought that technology, that manufacturing understanding to general aviation aircraft as well.
So it's, you know, you have that sort of monocoque build Bonanza here that is that sort of big leap forward from your traditional furniture maker, shall we say, of aircraft of the 20s and 30s.
Well, you can obviously see the amount of labor that would go into producing a Staggerwing, all the wood work that's required to build a wood Staggerwing and a metal airplane. For an example, the G model Staggerwing in 1946 sold for right around $30,000, and the Bonanza at the time was a little over $8,000 to $9,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's just labor cost, man hours going into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's
because every one of these had to be put in a jig, hand nailed, and then of course you've got all the fabric work that has to take place after that's completed.
There's just incredible craftsmanship goes into these. That's just the little structural additions on it as well, and I guess every one of them slightly different.
Slightly, yes. Yeah. There's 5 different types of wood that's used in the production of a Staggerwing. You've got balsa, you've got birch plywood, mahogany, Sitka, spruce.
And reasonably small tanks as well. What sort of range would you sort of?
Those would probably be about 32-gallon tanks. This particular aircraft had the 2 lower tanks and had a tank under the co-pilot and pilot in the fuselage. It was typically a 28-gallon tank.
So decent, decent amount of fuel gives a decent range at a decent speed. So everything you want from a good executive shuttle. It's.
But there were so many different models of the Staggerwing. They all kind of changed. For instance, the G model I fly or I flew quite often had 6 tanks. Had the 32s in the wing, had a 49 in the rear, and a 28-gallon in the fuselage, and we'll see, or in the forward fuselage, and we'll see that. So that's roughly what 190-something gallons of fuel. Now, if I topped it all the way off, and had upper wings had tanks as well.
Okay.
So if you topped it all the way off, you were right at gross with maybe 1 or 2 people in there. So typically you wouldn't top completely off.
So it's interesting that you see. What model is this one?
I believe this is an E. Let me see here real quick. It's an E-17B.
Yeah, so you're starting to see that sort of amalgamation of metal structure, wooden structure. Being a Hawker fan as well, I do quite like that you have metal tubing around the cockpit and then wood everywhere else. Very sort of Hurricane-ish.
Okay.
So I guess that's why I like them. But it's brilliant to see them unfabricated, because I guess me being your general idiot, really, you don't necessarily get the scale of spars, strengtheners, things that go into keeping the aircraft light and strong as well, with just the number of little bit of cross bracing in that top wing, bits and pieces, just to give it that rigid. It's terrible. Rigid. That's it. Thank you, Ellie. That word. To do it, and again, the craftsmanship that goes. I'm loving every moment of this, which is not. Doesn't make for great telly, me just being as happy as I am today, but I hope that comes across, because I just really am. Thank you.
If you'll notice, they had this plywood piece on the wing tip area, and early on they had some fluttering that took place. So this is one of the ways that they solved that fluttering issue, is to put this solid piece of plywood in the construction design of it.
So it's simple evolutions of the aircraft to just continue to make it better, make it safer, and go from there. So, aluminum struts, I'm guessing?
Yes, they were aluminum, and they had the balsa wood that formed where you put the fabric around. And this is balsa here. The Staggerwing also had, numerous different engine design or engine applications. For instance, a lot of the early Staggerwings had the Jacobs 230 horse engine, or up to 275, 230 horsepower engines. But the majority of the Staggerwings you see now have the Pratt & Whitney 450 horse R985 on them.
Which is about as bulletproof an engine as you can get.
I said 230, I meant 330 horsepower Jacobs.
So you've got the sort of collection of all the engines over there as well, haven't you? So what are we seeing here? We've got everybody. Have we got
It is one of the things we wanted to do with this part of the museum exhibit is show an example of all the different brands of engines that Travel Air or Beech used: Jacobs, Kenner, Continental, Pratt & Whitney, Lycoming, Wright, and an example of each one of those. So we have everything from the OX5 over here to the left all the way up to the what is still in production today and used on King Airs and lots of different aircraft, the PT6 Pratt & Whitney jet engine. I mentioned the Pratt & Whitney R985 450 horsepower engine. This is an example of it here that was on most Staggerwings. It's a cutaway design, so you can see how it works on the inside and what have you. So it's very interesting.
The Wasp Junior was everywhere, was in everything, wasn't it? Yeah. It was one of the greats of sort of U.S. engine design. And Pratt & Whitney made those radios. Still turning them out.
Well, they're not producing them anymore. That there are so many of them produced that they're still able to get parts for them and overhaul them. And so you're still seeing them on Beavers, de Havilland Beavers. Beech 18s are still operating, and some commercially to this day. So this kind of steps into some of our military section. This is the AT-11 example that we have in the museum, and this was the primary trainer for all the navigators, bombers, pilots preparing for World War II or during World War II as we ramped up doing our bombing operations over Germany. And this is an example. About 90% of all bomber crews were trained in the Beechcraft AT-11.
Wow.
So they were trained to fly the B-27, the B-24, the B-17. They were trained in an AT-11.
Yeah, I interviewed an old Havoc pilot whose name's gone straight to my Bob Ryerson last year, and he talks about how they skipped this during his twin engine training, and he went straight to the B-25 as his advanced trainer.
Wow. Yeah.
They went from the Cessna, the Bamboo bomber as the basic twin, and they were supposed to move on to the AT-11, and he was the first class that went straight to a B-25. He said it was a bit of a jump, as you can imagine. So this, I suppose, is an important element of the Beech story, because we tend to look at Second World War as the frontline aircraft, the training aircraft outside of maybe the Harvard, the AT-6, or the T-6 even, beg your pardon, gets a lot of the fame. But as you said, navigators, bombardiers getting used to
That's
the
a
Norden.
That's a Norden bomb site, yes.
And, you know, that they would be training in a beach with the most secret bit of kit that was being deployed.
That was so top secret that they actually brought it out to the aircraft to go on a training flight with armed guards. And once the flight training was over for the day, it was removed and under guard and secretly put away. It was very, very top secret at the time.
And we're very happy that one of your B-17s there is Sally B.
Yeah, okay.
which lives up at Duxford, of course. So how many of these were built? Because I'm thinking of that fantastic picture of Mr. and Mrs. Beech at the factory with just rows of these being prepared. Do you know, off the top of your head, I'm putting you on the spot here. Do you know how many of these they made?
I don't know exactly how many AT-11s were built. I do not know the answer to that.
It's just that image is in my head.
Yeah.
I think you know the same one with them on the gantry with
Right.
all of them lined up. Yeah. Did they build for anybody else, or is it just their own aircraft during that period?
Pretty much just for the Beech brand. This airframe actually has an interesting history itself, because even after it was used in the war effort for training purposes, it had a life in South America, spraying crops, it did some surveying, and we found it in a salvage yard in Denver, Colorado, probably 20 years ago. And it's a long process of renovation. We saw the rectangular windows on the other side. Those were actually put in after the war for civilian use. And at this time, we're replacing those on this side with the porthole windows as they were designed in the for the trainer itself. They weren't really designing these to be comfort.
No.
they were workhorses and training tools.
And rugged, because
Very rugged.
you're going to have a trainee crew on board who's probably still getting used to things. They're going to be bounced around a little bit, and of course squeezing even fully powered turrets into the top of them as well. So it's a great all-rounder, the AT-11.
It was. Yeah. It was either or when it came out of the factory, that could be converted, but it was either a bomber trainer or a gun trainer. And so you could see that the pod on the top, they put that into all production so they could put it in place. But this airplane was strictly used for 100-pound bombs. It had 10 on board, and they would go out in the desert and practice their marksmanship, hitting the targets.
Yeah. Putting them in the pickle barrel.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Okay, so you've got
Just a
fabrication process on display there.
Most people have no idea about the fabric process. The average person that comes through that's not, really an aviation enthusiast, so they're quite impressed with learning to see how the actual fabric aircraft were produced and put together.
Here's a question that's probably going to put you on the spot again. For say the Beech company, what was the fabric? Because in the UK,
Irish linen.
Oh, you're using Irish linen as well. So it's that same sort of brand. I guess it's produced here in the US.
Right.
Because we're sort of in the right neck of woods for high quality linens and cottons and things. Because it's I just finished reading a book about denim, so that's on my mind as well. Because the big factories here, Japanese jeans, actually, funnily enough, how they took on the mantle of that sort of 1950s. Random point, dear viewer, don't go buy that book. It's called Amatori. It's fantastic. Right, so over here now we have.
Well, I was going to point out, most people don't realize that Beech was in the drone production business. This was in the 1950s. They'd use these drones to tow targets for target practice.
Okay.
Had a little 6-cylinder McCulloch engine in it, and it went roughly 350 miles an hour or so. They would launch them off the side of a boat, or a ship, I should say, with the JATO tube, and they towed targets. So most people don't know Beech was involved with that during the war effort. Back behind me, we can see the U-21. This was used by the military back in the early 60s, the Vietnam era, and they wanted an aircraft. Basically took the Queen Air airframe and put PT-6s on it. It was sort of a backcountry aircraft at that time. They wanted to be able to carry heavy loads, very rugged aircraft, and the example of it. It's the grandfather to the King Air today. Yeah.
So it was the Army that sort of engined up the Queen,
Right?
That then made that leap to the King. Which
That's
is
exactly right. An example of the T-34 Charlie during the 80s and 90s. These aircraft were the primary trainer for the naval pilots down in Pensacola.
Yep.
They're using an aircraft now that's Beech produced called the PT-6, but it's a whole different design.
Yes.
This is on loan to us from the Naval Museum in Pensacola. We've done some nice trading back and forth through the years.
Brilliant.
Nice partnership.
It was interesting to see how much snow they got.
Oh yeah, that was crazy, wasn't it?
That was a bit wild.
This is a C-45. The Navy also bought the D-18 or the Model 18 design for transport. So that's an example of C-45.
So the Model 18 has an interesting life, isn't it?
It does.
Because it becomes the 1811, it becomes this.
Well, in a few minutes we're going to see three that give it sort of set an example of just how different they were in their
manufacturing. Philosophy?
What their application was
Yes.
designed for. That's what I'm trying to say.
I'm talking over you. Just swap me
No,
away,
you're-
Charles. It's all good. There you go.
Let's walk over here and take a look at this. We're kind of bouncing around a little bit,
No,
but that's
it's
kind of
fine.
the way this works.
Yeah.
Back in the 80s, again, as I mentioned earlier, Beechcraft was in so many cases ahead of their time in design and concepts. And this is an example of a pressurized, single engine, jet prop driven aircraft that never got off the ground. They built three of them, prototypes. They called it the 38P. All those prototypes were destroyed. But a gentleman was aware of that Beech had this concept design, so they built one, and that's how we arrived at this one. Now what you see is all the different single-engine pressurized aircraft that are out there now that are so popular. Beech was way ahead of its time.
So I suppose we should just clarify, by not getting off the ground, it was an unsuccessful aircraft that flew quite happily.
Thank you.
There will be someone in the comments that will say, what? They built an airplane that couldn't fly? No, it was...
In the late 60s, most of your automobile companies were coming out with cars that basically what we refer to now as muscle cars back in the day. Well, Beech and aircraft sort of did the same thing. This is an example of where they took a 55 airframe Baron and put the 380 horse Lycoming engine on. It was quite hot rod. This aircraft has a service ceiling of 30,000 feet, and it's extremely fast airplane. They built them for about 5 or 6 years, and it was sort of the test bed for the Duke, the Beechcraft Duke, which we're going to see in just a minute.
So
you can see how large the engine is on this smaller airframe. Very rare aircraft called a 56 TC.
When you open the throttles and that, the pitch up must be quite something.
I've never been in a 56 TC. We just received this aircraft as a donation this last year from a nice gentleman up in Illinois.
That's fantastic.
Very rare aircraft.
We're starting to get into the aircraft I remember from going flying with my uncle in his aircraft, because this sort of grouping of Beech aircraft were the ones that were all over the place in the 70s and 80s.
This is an example of the engine.
Oh, right, okay.
So you can see it with the turbocharger, Lycoming, 380 horsepower. So, and this is the engine that they put in the Duke, which was a pretty popular design in the 70s. in late 80s. And that's actually the last Duke that was built in 84. One of our founders, Jim Gorman, and his wife donated this aircraft. It was out of their private collection.
The Pima Air and Space Museum in Tucson, Arizona is home to one of the largest non-government funded aviation and space museums in the world. Featuring nearly 400 aircraft, the museum is home to an incredible collection like NASA's NB-52 X-15 dropship and 747 SP Sophia Airborne Observatory, to a wealth of rare military types from air forces all around the world, to the first production 777. Whether you're a military or civilian aviation geek, there will be an incredible aircraft around every corner of this epic 80-acre site for you to explore. As the Aviation Show's partnership with the Pima Air and Space Museum enters its third year, we're delighted to say that Pima is truly a top of your bucket list museum to visit. And it keeps getting better, as this year the Tucson Military Vehicle Museum will be opening right next door. To find out more about the incredible collection and the fantastic events coming up at the Pima Air and Space Museum, and of course the Tucson Military Vehicle Museum, head over to www.pimaair.org to plan your trip to one of the world's great aviation collections, and one that now includes tanks next door, if that's your sort of thing. So, we've come to the corner of the hangar that has, I'm just going to say, this Starship is wild. It looks like a beach aircraft. It's got the same sort of lines, but then there's a few bits on it that just, it's the sort of comic book approach to it with the canard wing and the pusher engines. How did the Starship come
well, it's the Burt Rutan canard design. Beech was looking for something between a jet, a turbojet, and a King Air that could sort of fill that gap in speed, efficiency, and it was a great concept. But it was also a composite-built aircraft, and it had design specifications for it, but as with any new design applying for a type certificate, you've got to work with the FAA, and through the process of getting it certified, it kept getting heavier, and they kept the design needed this and that applied to it, and before you know it, we had a very heavy airplane.
So that takes some of that speed out and starts bringing it away from that sort of sweet spot between the two aircraft that it was trying to fit in between. What's the history of this particular aircraft?
This is serial number 49 of, I believe, about 51 that were built, and it was in Mexico prior to us receiving it. So they built roughly 52 of them. It's got a huge wingspan, as you can see, so it was not the most pleasant aircraft to put in a hangar. It took up a lot of space. There was quite a few marketing issues about it that probably was the demise to it. But most pilots that I know that have flown these, there's still 3 in existence now, 3 or 4 that are flying. And they say it's a wonderful flying airplane. It's just a pleasure to fly and works very, very, very nicely. But it had some marketing flaws. I mean, like for instance, you have to carry all your luggage to the very back of the aircraft, so you're dragging it through the cockpit to every time you unload or load, and so
just a few little, I guess you could say, classic Burt Rutan quirks that held it slightly back a bit, because So here's the Cutaway with the cargo spot. The cargo space at the rear, and it is a shame, because this is just.
And when I make comments about sort of different things that maybe weren't as popular, they're not from my personal perspective, because I never flew the aircraft or don't know this for sure. But I've heard them talk about pilots with starting the aircraft, they can't see the propellers. They can't clear the area as easy, so they need a line crew to help with that. When it sheds ice, there were some issues about the ice going through the propeller blades, what that might cause as an issue during flying in weather. But it's got beautiful lines, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, it is gorgeous. As an enthusiast rather than a pilot, I tend to see things in aesthetics as much as I do anything else. But it's a great story. It's a shame it didn't quite work out. Because we need good-looking aircraft. That's the whole point of them. And look at all these fantastically looking aircraft. We do have one more Staggerwing back here. What's the story of the? I can't.
That's called the Lionheart.
Yep.
It's not a Beechcraft product, but one of our founders, he gave it to the museum, bequeathed it to us, and it was a design that a gentleman out of Huntsville, Alabama came up with, composite Staggerwing.
Okay.
So it was intended to be a home-built type of aircraft. I think there was somewhere around 10 or so completed, and I'm not sure any are flying today, but that's an example of what a modern-looking Staggerwing would look like, minus the struts.
Yeah. It's an interesting homage, isn't it?
Yes.
But what a project to try to do as a home build. Goodness. That's a lot of aircraft. Yeah. So we've got the
serial
Baron.
number. Yeah, this is serial number 1 Baron,
Oh, wow, okay,
55. So you can get a good idea of the size of those engines. This was the normal 0470 displacement engine that they put on the 55 airframe compared to the 540 that they put on the 56 TC on the same size airframe. Early Travel Air. This is one of their early multi-engine designs. Still a very efficient aircraft even to this day with the straight tail.
So bringing back the name as a sort of homage to the original
Must
company.
have been, yeah. Yeah. This aircraft kind of speaks for itself with all the different flags of different countries. Obviously been around the world numerous times. It's been to Moscow, Cuba, been over the North Pole. If you look in the cockpit up on the panel, it has a sextant for celestial navigation. So this aircraft has been around the world numerous times.
So why did it go around the world numerous times? Was it just?
He was a professor up in the Northeast, and he had a lot of contacts around the world with other universities, and he just wanted to have an adventure.
That's an adventure, yeah, goodness.
Yeah.
And that is a long way in what is not a big airplane. You have to be quite friendly with your crew.
This V-tail's been around the world, I think, 3 or 4 times. So it's sort of our around the world section here. And then, of course, the A36 with the turboprop. Beechcraft never produced a turboprop Bonanza, but you could do it on an aftermarket.
So this is probably a question you can answer, but you said that they never produced one with a turboprop. Why not? If there's an aftermarket for it, would that just be too small of an aftermarket for the main company to take on, to tool up to?
Well, that'd be a question they'd have to answer,
Yeah.
but the A36 performed as they intended it to be and as it was designed.
And I guess that there's the fun and games of recertification and all that, and if it's slightly different if it's an aftermarket one, yeah.
That F-33 right there only has 190 something hours on it total time. It basically was mothballed.
Oh, wow.
It's practically a brand new airplane with very little airtime put on it.
Do you know why it was mothballed, or is it just
The
so
gentleman
happened?
he just kept it in a controlled environment, and that's flew it a little bit, and we were quite lucky to get such a unique original paint, original interior, even has the original avionics in it,
wow.
which wouldn't be that much fun to own now because of how much improvements, and you'd have to actually change some things, but add some additions.
So I guess from a heritage perspective, the fact that it is factory fresh essentially gives you a good insight
Correct.
into materials,
Correct.
paint codes, things like that. Yeah, that's an interior I remember from.
Mm-hmm.
My uncle was a Blanca man, I'm afraid, but it's
That was a great wooden fabric airplane.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fast.
oh yeah, plywood rocket he called it. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go up and see the last hangar.
Okay. So we're really here in off season. How many visitors do you tend to get through in a year?
About 6,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that primarily during the summer months?
We had probably one of the most visited Januaries on record.
Oh wow, okay.
It's funny. It's like sometimes everybody comes at once. This is kind of a quiet day, actually.
I'm not complaining because it means I get the run of the place and can completely monopolize your time.
Did you know that the early Bonanzas had wooden propellers? Yeah. Yeah.
One of my first episodes was with Elena Lewis out at Culver Props, where they do the sort of hand machine carved wooden props for home builds and a lot of First World War recreations and things. And she was great fun talking about understanding the sort of quirks that sort of owners and builders are going through today to get the right pitch for the props and things. And hers are just works of art.
And she's with Culver?
Culver Props, yeah. Up in, it's gone straight out of my head. Beautiful part of the world up north. But she was great fun, very open with what they get on. And of course, the stuff she puts on social media is so soothing, as there's just bits of wood being turned into propellers. It's great. Okay.
We call this the Tinket hangar, after the Tinket family, who was real instrumental on raising the money and sort of the kingpin behind this hangar section happening. 3 examples of Beech 18s that we're looking at right here. A 52 model, an E, which is a 59 model, and then a example of a freight Beech 18 in the rear here.
So the 18, and I guess as we were in seeing the 1811, is it the same base platform between the two, or are they completely different aircraft?
They're basically the same airframe, yes. You're talking about between the E and the D?
Oh, sorry, the 11, the AT11.
It's basically the same. There was quite a few improvements. I mean, remember that the AT11 was built in 41 and this was 52, so of course there was a few, but basically the same airframe, yes.
Yeah, they're sort of taking that, the military aircraft and maximizing the commercial value for it as well. Because the 18 is, especially in its all bare metal form, is another just classic Beech design, isn't it? That looks right and goes right.
This particular 18's still flown pretty regularly. Went to AirVenture in it in 23. I apologize for what it might look like on the inside, but you can kind of, it's still corporate. We have mats down to protect the carpet, so just disregard, but you can kind of see the comfort level. This is the grandfather to the King Air.
Yeah.
It's in production today. This is a very original 18 as well. A lot of them had a lot of modifications.
Stick my head in.
This aircraft is almost exactly as it came out of the factory in Wichita in 1952. Yeah.
It's just that craftsmanship on the inside, isn't it? That beautiful sort of tight red leather, and oh, it's fantastic. So we've got 318s, we've got 3 more Staggerwings. We've, utterly spoiled, really, aren't we? It's so what's this? I have noticed as we've gone along, a lot of the aircraft are named. So is that the families of the aircraft, the owners that had the aircraft beforehand, or is there just a story to go with the aircraft?
Well, this is a pretty famous Staggerwing here called Big Red. Back in the 60s, the guy that started the Staggerwing Club, a gentleman by the name of Dub Yarborough, owned this aircraft, and as I said, was the president of the club and very well known. Flew it regularly out of the Atlanta area, and so it went to all the fly-ins of the day, the AAA fly-in up in Ottumwa, Iowa, and just kind of was given that name. This is the aircraft my father fell in love with and ended up buying from Mr. Yarborough. And as I said earlier, we had a sporting goods company, and Dub Yarborough came to work for my father as well as his sales manager, and he was one of the founders of the museum. So the two of them were here in Tullahoma. They had had a Staggerwing to put on display, and that's kind of how the museum got started.
Fantastic. So this is where it starts then?
Yes.
Oh, that's brilliant.
The G model is one of only 20 that were built post-war Staggerwings. This is B3, and we have B7 in the museum as well. Some interesting things you can sort of point out about the differences between the D model.
D model here, you were saying, Charles, has got the open end cowling on the back as opposed to the G. What other sort of tweaks were made between the two models?
If you'll notice, the slope of the windscreen is a little more flat on the G model than it is the D, and the shape of the vertical tail is more rounded on the G than the D. So they made quite a few changes. Most people don't even notice it when they just take a glance, because the wings are staggered.
Yeah. That's what everybody looks at.
Exactly.
Yeah. And sort of the fuselage is slightly less pronounced in the pinch coming back.
Yeah. This is a pretty good example of the inside of a corporate late model G model Staggerwing.
They're all in fabulous condition.
This is the aircraft I have most of my time in.
So, what is it like to fly?
It's a beautiful flying aircraft.
I know that's probably the standard, but as someone who's flown, this one in particular, it is as lovely.
Well,
as
it's a
everybody
tailwheel
says.
airplane, of course, and if people know the difference between a tricycle gear and a tailwheel airplane, it's the characteristics on landing can be, or takeoff can be a bit different.
Because you don't have a lot of clearance, really, do you, on the gear? It's not the longest strut on the gear, so you're quite. I'm thinking sort of sports car, isn't it? It's quite low down.
But it's a very docile airplane. If you're trained properly, not a hard airplane to fly.
And is there any quirks with it, with engine or things like that?
No, but
if someone's learning to fly them, that you have to say, just keep an eye on this, or.
Well, the Pratt & Whitney R995 is a bulletproof engine, but the round engines required a little more finesse, taking care of them, warming them up than the horizontally opposed engines. So there's some nuances to knowing how to operate a round engine versus the more modern horizontally opposed engines that most airplanes have now. But it's a very good, very nice flying airplane. I was trained properly early on to fly tailwheel aircraft, so it was a nice transition for me. I know some folks that are, start out in a nose gear airplane, to transition immediately to a Staggerwing would be a bit overwhelming for them. But
as we're here, do you want to if I can steal your expertise and just sort of talk us around the cockpit, because it does have that fantastic switchable control yoke and the like. I mean, is there anything within the cockpit that's sort of noticeable to point out on?
Well, one thing that's interesting about this aircraft in particular is that is exactly how it came out of the factory.
Oh, right.
When we restored it, went right back to the same design, the layout of the instruments, and we do have some modern radios, modern as of maybe 20 years ago. So since it came out in '46, they're considered modern, but they're kind of disguised down in the lower left. But yes, it had the flip over yoke where you could hand it over to the co-pilot. There's no brakes on the right. So that was interesting in learning how to fly it. So when I jumped into the left seat, my instructor, he did not have a yoke in front of him and he did not have brakes. So I was pretty much, he was along for the ride. However, it worked out for our landings and takeoffs as I got checked out. But just a beautiful leather interior. You can see Beechcraft with their luxury design and to make the corporate executive feel comfortable in the back. And I will have to say there's nothing like flying 10,000 feet with the puffy clouds looking through the struts, the red wings, the biplane. It's you can't hardly explain. You have to experience it to understand. And feel fortunate that I've been able to experience that. So beautiful airplane.
Totally envious.
Yeah.
But it's let's just sort of talk about the legacy of the company, because you come out of the box as a new company with something like this, which is an iconic aircraft. The other Hangar, we have an entire generation of aircraft that most people will remember, of my age, from sort of 70s and 80s, going flying with family. Beach aircraft were everywhere. It's sort of one of these synonymous companies, really. What is the legacy of Beech to you as you're looking after the collection here? What is the story that you try to highlight to guests when you come in?
Well, obviously we want to have one of all their designs from Travel Air to at least through the 80s, most of our aircraft, the Starship lineage, and just an example of each one of their beautiful designs. But just to preserve the quality and the heritage of what they intended for Beech to be, as it is today. So I will correct myself on something I told you earlier. We were looking at the uncovered Staggerwing, and I mentioned the tanks were 32. They're 23. And when I got next to our Staggerwing here, it hit me, yes, but they're 23 gallons per wing, 28 forward fuselage, and 49 in the back. So
it's brilliant. Is there anything else you want to show us, Charles? Because as soon as we hit stop on this, I'm going to probably keep bugging you with questions and things, because
well, I was going to.
It's been an interesting trip for me, getting to Air and Space and the Marine Corps Museum and now down to you. And I have to admit, despite seeing some of the things I've seen,
I think it'd be interesting to just in the background.
I'm going to be very nice to you now. This is my highlight of the trip.
Oh, come on.
No, honestly, I was quite happy to walk around Varhazy and geek out about some of those things, but I've been struggling to come up with questions because my eyes just keep getting drawn off, and I just want to go look at airplanes. I guess that's the Beech fanboy in me, but thank you so much for this, because it's an incredible collection.
I walk through quite often, and every time I walk through, I kind of see a new sight that I hadn't seen or something unique. And I'm looking at the wall lit up behind us, the mural with the silhouettes over the top of this 1946 example of a freight Beech 18. And those silhouettes came off of Wichita's factory, Plant 1, that was right next to the main offices at Wichita. So they're pretty unique. Something we received from the Beech family, or the Beech company. So, yeah.
So, good lines of communication now with the
Very
London
good
company.
Yeah.
So I interrupted you by just saying how giddy I was for being here. But you were going to say about one last, was it one of the 18s before I rudely interrupted you? Or
Oh, I do want to point out that they actually put the Staggerwing on snow skis as well. So they were floats, not many, but were designed to be put on floats for utility reasons, and the snow skis. So that's an example of that.
yeah, but landing one of these on snow would have been interesting.
Yeah.
So, Charles, if someone wants to find out more about the museum and come and find you, where should they look? Let's give the website a bit of a plug.
Yeah,
as
it's
we
the
wrap up.
beechcraftheritage.com, or excuse me, .org. The Heritage Beechcraft Museum.org. We have a beautiful website, and give us a call. If you're near Nashville or Chattanooga or Huntsville, Alabama, I mean, we're real close. Come see us.
Easy drive down.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
thank you
Right.
so much
Yeah.
for your time. This has been a
Right.
delight. It really has. And I wasn't just saying that. I'm so happy. Super.
But thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you for having us. I'd like to say thanks to all of our fantastic supporters over on Patreon. If you head over to our Patreon page, you can join the fun from just £3 a month, plus a bit of VAT, get your name in these very credits, and get all the episodes ad-free and early as soon as I get the edit finished. The Aviation Show is hosted and produced by Matt Bone and is a Boney Abroad production.